Hey everyone, welcome to Princess of Gay. I'm your host Connie, and today we are here with the Blair Witch Project. This is a donation reward from, well, who do you think? It's, yeah. It's funny that almost all of our donation rewards, movie wise especially, tend to always be from the same person. Venom donates more than anyone else right now, so it's just how it ends up being. There are donations from others though. The other movie you saw this week, the Animal Crossing movie, was from someone else, so it's like there do end up being donations from others as well. We just get most of them from Venom. But let's talk about this. So yes, I've never seen the Blair Witch Project. And this is the found footage horror movie. Like, this is the one that started that genre. Like, there might have been one or two or something before this, but this is the one that started it as a genre that made it popular. And this film was interesting because while I have not ever seen it, I do know a bit about it. I do know that this film was years in the making. I believe it took about 5, 6 years from conception to actually being released. Um, that it was originally conceived as the idea of a urban legend kind of situation, and that it was the first one of the first at least movies to be marketed almost entirely on the internet. And I know how they did that. They marketed this in a way that made people think it was a real thing, not a movie. The way they marketed it, they marketed it to where people thought it was like real news stuff. Like, this was real, a real camera that was found, and the events in this really happened because they put forth effort into making it seem like that was the case. That was the idea. And it kind of brings you back to the entire War of the Worlds broadcast on radio, back when that happened, and, people thought that that was really happening. It's kind of similar to that in terms of the same vibes and the same kind of trickery, I guess you could say. Um, but yeah, I don't actually know what it's about. Like, I can guess something has to do with witchcraft. But that's about it. Because I don't actually really know much of anything about this. I just haven't heard. I think there's a couple other movies like that make this a series rather than just a single one-off. And I know that there was a game that came out like a couple years back that pretty much everyone agreed should have been better than it was. Like, from what I've gathered from what people have said, and I saw like a let's play or two, people kind of thought it was like this should have been better. This could have been better. They just it just wasn't, and that was kind of my thoughts on it. Um, so I know that the game isn't like directly based on the movie. It's like just kind of the same sitch, I guess you could say. So I know that like there's like the effigies in the trees and stuff like that. I know that there's a lot of symbolism within it. I don't know the actual plot, or I guess like the witch or monster or whatever we end up seeing. I don't know how much of that we see. I don't know how much this movie relies on like jump scares as compared to more atmospheric stuff, or maybe a combination. I don't know how this is all handled. Because I just never got around to seeing it. Uh, but I'm interested. I'm very interested to see what this movie has in store. Because a lot of people still to this day praise the shit out of the Blair Witch Project. It it's kind of a cultural phenomenon when you think about it. In terms of horror movies, like this is a big one. Like I would actually say this is up there with the likes of Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, uh what's the one called? Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It is Texas, right? You know what I'm talking about. Leatherface. Um but yeah, it's like it's up there with those kind of like movies, just obviously not like a slasher film exactly. But it's up there in terms of like how big it is for the horror genre. It revolutionized horror in a big way. And I'm very excited to find out why and to see if I think it's as good as the praise kind of implies. Oh, you could put The Exorcist up there as another big one. Psycho, can't forget Psycho. Hell, even the first Paranormal Activity you can include in that kind of list. Like you really could. But yeah, I'm excited to see this. Since I know it is found footage, I don't expect like the best camera work or anything. I don't expect like the best acting either, because I think the acting, because it's being found footage, is going to come across as what would be the right word? Not bad, but it's going to come across as very awkward. That's a good word, I feel. Very awkward, and I think that's going to kind of be the idea, to kind of make these characters feel more like just regular people rather than, movie characters. Which I'm all about. I can dig that. But yeah, I believe this movie was even kind of marketed with the idea that this was all like actual found footage. Like they played that idea up, that it was like a quote unquote true story, even though it wasn't. But that was the idea. That was what they were going for. And again, from what I've heard, it worked wonders. It really worked. So I'm excited for this. We're just going to get into the movie and hope for the best. So thank you to Venom, as always, for donating for this, and let's get going. When the screen fades to black, pause this redirect and go to the description below. Follow the link to the reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after it fades to black and then fades back in, everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the movie. So, that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you at the reaction. And we are back, and we will begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So, I'm conflicted. Because this is a movie I don't know if I would watch again. Maybe with a reaction. Someone else's reaction, obviously, but I don't know if I would watch this on my own time, because this is a very slow burn type of movie. It takes a bit to get, like, to the actual supernatural, spooky stuff and everything. And a lot of the time is just kind of set up for where everything leads to. With hearing the legends of the Blair Witch and everything, the stories from the locals, all of that sets up stuff in the future, especially the story about the kids and everything. But it does take a bit to actually get going, and some parts of it can feel a little boring because of that. On top of it, because it is so, like, just inherently and strongly found footage style, it doesn't feel like a movie. Like, it feels like you're watching almost like a true crime thing, which that's never been my favorite kind of thing. That kind of shit just bugs me out. But it's like, it feels more like that, and I know that's the point. That's the idea that you're supposed to be getting from this. but still, it's harder to watch because it's not in a typical movie fashion. Like you compare it to like a horror movie that's, you know, directed and has the camera work and everything of like what you would expect from a movie. And it's like, oh yeah, you can get through that. But this, it feels so, I guess for lack of a better word, real, that it doesn't feel like it's an entertaining kind of watch. You know what I mean? Um, and I say I'm conflicted because even with all of that, I would say this is one of the best horror movies ever made. And it gets me emotional saying that. It does. Because it's like whenever I discover something that I think is this good, it gets me emotional. It's like I get emotional like anytime I see any kind of movie that's this good, whether it be something like The Green Mile or The Menu or whatnot. And it's just this is probably one of the greatest horror movies ever made. And I say that even with the fact that some of it is very slow, even with the fact that it can get a little boring at times. I say all of this understanding that. And I say that also adding in, though, that that's kind of the beauty of it. That's kind of what makes it so good. The fact that it feels so real, like it feels like a real found footage, um, just recording of these people, these kids falling into some supernatural shit and, you know, dying, presumably. The fact that we never see this Blair Witch or whatever it is. The fact that a lot of it's kind of left in the dark and we just kind of have to assume. And just the build up, the tension, the suspense, the way everything is foreshadowed, and then once it starts happening, it's like actually really freaky. All of that is like, it's really good. The pacing of it actually helps it in that regard because it adds to the tension and the anticipation of what's to come. And as it starts going along and starts getting like the scares, the just freaky stuff start getting more and more common, it's like it just leaves you on edge. At any moment you're expecting a jump scare, but a jump scare technically never comes. There aren't really any jump scares in this. Every moment though you're expecting it, and it has you on the edge of your seat because of that. And you're just awaiting for the shit to drop. And it never really does. But it still includes some spooks, some scariness, some high intense situations. And I think also having the characters like losing their minds and getting upset at each other also helped with that. Because it helped build that sense of fear and emotional just intensity that was needed for the characters to have. These actors did a really good job as well, because it's like, especially like the girl, like specifically when she's doing the screams, those were guttural, like those were violent screams. In the best way, of course, because it's like she sounded like I feel like an actual person just screaming bloody murder out of fear. Didn't feel like an actress screaming. And I mentioned it during the reaction, and I do still kind of wonder how much of this was actually ad-libbed, or if all of this was just fully scripted. Because it feels like a lot of it could have just been made up on the spot. Like they were given the idea of it, told like the basic slate of what to say, and just like went with it. It's hard to say without any direct confirmation. And I want to check out these actors who were in this. Let me see if I can find that real quick here. Okay, so Heather Donahue played Heather. No, wait. No, that's the character's. Wow, even the Wikipedia page is listing it as like the character's name here. Heather Donahue is the character. Ray Hance is the actress who played her. Okay. Let's see if she's been in anything else. Because she definitely was the star of this for sure. She did really well. Apparently she was in a mini-series called Taken, which was a Steven Spielberg series, apparently, on the Sci-Fi Channel. Okay. Oh. Okay, so her and the other actors used their real names for the movie. So Heather Donahue is her real name, but it's also the character's name. She regretted using her actual name and changed it years later. And it apparently affected her employment and stuff. That sucks. Her last acting role was in the 2008 direct-to-DVD horror film The Morgue. So she wasn't even in a lot, according to this. It seems like it just did not, it did not go well for her and everything. But it looks like when she left acting, she became medicinal, that's correct, medicinal marijuana grower. That's interesting. In 2011, she signed a publishing deal for her book about her time as a marijuana grower. Da, 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 da. Okay. Yeah, it looks like she did a number of movies and a couple shows, but nothing like huge. Apparently, she was in an episode of Always Sunny. That's interesting. Okay. So there's at least three films because apparently some of the footage from this, I guess, appears in the 2016 one, which apparently is the third, according to this. But is also, according to this, the follow up to the original that ignores the second movie. So it's one of those things. And also, apparently, she has footage in the second movie, too. So that's interesting. I guess there's a bit of stuff regarding that. Um, yeah, it looks like the other actors did various things here and there. Not really anything like huge that I would really know them for, but yeah. And this film did really well, but I already knew that. I already knew this had a really good critical and uh, audience response. Um, the found footage technique received universal praise. It was not the first film to use it. Okay, so I mentioned that in the pre thoughts that It might not have been the exact first to use it, but made it popular and all. And it was declared a milestone in film history due to its critical and box office success. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars and called it an extraordinarily effective horror film. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone called it a groundbreaker and fright that reinvents scary for the new millennium. And Todd McCarthy of Variety said, an intensely imaginative piece of conceptual filmmaking that also delivers the goods as a dread-drenched horror movie. The Blair Witch Project puts a clever modern twist on the universal fear of the dark and things that go bump in the night. So yeah, there were obviously some detractors and all, of course, but it was overall very well received. Um, and yeah, there was a game that released in 2019. I mentioned that that people thought should have been better. Did not do as well as it could have. Um, from what I saw of it, though, it wasn't like outright terrible. From like the Let's Plays I had seen of it, it's just not very memorable. So yeah, let me see here. Yeah, according to this, there are 3 movies. According to this, it's a trilogy. But the second movie is ignored in the third one, apparently. So, that's a thing. Uh, yeah, I'm trying to see like exactly the reception to the game. Mixed or average reviews. Yeah, that sounds about right. About a 7 out of 10 or so seems to be the general consensus. And from what I remembered, that seems about right. But yeah, so like I said, I thought this was fantastic. The tone, the themes, even the pacing, which I did again have issues with. I think it actually lent to the film. I think that's actually what made it so good. It was so intense, so scary, and I was cracking jokes a lot of the time during the reaction and stuff because I was actually on edge. I was unnerved by what was going on. It was actually pretty freaky. Um, was not the scariest horror film I've seen by any means, but it definitely worked. Building up that tension again, never showing the Blair Witch or whatever you want to call this force. I just will call it the Blair Witch because what else would you call it at this point? um, and just the way things get progressively more and more maddening, even with just the characters and their interactions and what they say and everything. It's like, yeah, it's really, really good. And I think that it was one of the best horror movies just because of how effective it is. It surprises it surprises me that I have such conflicting thoughts on it though, that it's like I think it's one of the best horror movies, but at the same time found it kind of boring at parts. But again, that's the point. That's very much intentional because of the style, because of it being such a huge groundbreaker in found footage horror films and just horror films in general. It is very much remembered by a lot of people as a major milestone in the genre. So, yeah, I can see why. Um, Tell me in the comments below, though, what did you think of the Blair Witch Project? And for now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.